Me now with analysis is Fox News strategic analyst, Lt Col Ralph Peters. Colonel Peters, this is really scary. And what's even more scary is the president, look at what's happened in Israel. We have a president of the United States, his political operation on the ground trying to undermine an ally as the president simultaneously is probably going to make the worst nuclear deal ever with the mullahs in Iran. When you put it all together, I mean, what does it tell you?
Well, it tells me, first of all, that there are no champagne corks popping at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue tonight, because the White House, Team Obama, were absolutely convinced that Netanyahu was going to go and they'd have a more amenable, cooperative, submissive government in Israel. And I think they're reading the Israelis wrong on every count, but that's no surprise. As far as this American Yahoo who tried to go to join ISIS, well, let's not overreact to that one. This guy had one term in the Air Force back in the 1980s, clearly didn't work out well for him. He kept losing airline mechanic jobs. Trust me, Sean, this guy had no military or marketable skills that he was going to transfer to Islamic State. He was a Walter Mitty kind of guy. Now, that doesn't mean you don't prosecute the guy, because you can't have Americans joining Islamic State. But I look at this guy and think, man, he'd do more harm to ISIS than good.
Unbelievable. All right, let me go to an interview the president did with Vice News. We're now in the 7th year of his administration, and he always goes to his default mechanism and pushing blame along and blaming George Bush. Watch this.
ISIL is a direct outgrowth of al-Qaeda in Iraq that grew out of our invasion, which is an example of unintended consequences, which is why we should generally aim before we shoot.
Okay, aim before we shoot. Let's go to 2007. Let's listen to George Bush's admonition, what would happen. He predicts with pinpoint accuracy if Obama's policies were followed through, what would happen. Listen to how accurate he was.
I know some in Washington would like us to start leaving Iraq now. To begin withdrawing before our commanders tell us we are ready would be dangerous for Iraq, for the region, and for the United States. It would mean surrendering the future of Iraq to al-Qaeda. It would mean that we'd be risking mass killings on a horrific scale. It would mean we allow the terrorists to establish a safe haven in Iraq to replace the one they lost in Afghanistan. It would mean increasing the probability that American troops would have to return at some later date to confront an enemy that is even more dangerous.
Perfect pinpoint accuracy. Pulled out early, didn't provide intelligence, didn't provide training. Look what happened.
Well, Sean, if President Obama developed athlete's foot, he would blame George W. Bush. And, let's get it out of the way. Of course the Bush administration made mistakes. The difference is the Bush administration did, however slowly, learn from their mistakes. And when George W. Bush left office, Islamist fanaticism, Islamist extremism in its al-Qaeda incarnation was clearly on the ropes, gasping for air. And President Obama created the vacuum into which terrorism moved. His precipitous, politically driven, cowardly retreat from Iraq after so much sacrifice on the part of our servicemen and women, that retreat created the vacuum into which not only al-Qaeda, but Islamic State, Khorasan Group, Jabhat al-Nusra in Syria, all of these groups moved. And a fundamental problem, and I'm going to use a politically incorrect word, is that President Obama is just not manly. And I don't mean manly in the, bar fighter, break the glasses kind of, but an article of manliness is the ability to admit you are wrong. We're all wrong sometimes. Obama can never admit he's wrong about anything ever.
I agree with all that, and he says the Republicans are in a phase that they'll outgrow, but this is bigger than that. A sitting president of the United States of America trying to undermine an ally country and their election. Does this not disturb you?
Well, of course it does, but it disturbs me, but it does not surprise me. Again, President Obama, who never really had a job in his life, has no contact with gritty, hard reality. He has been shaped by left-wing ideologues quite literally from the cradle up. And so it's part of his cosmology, his worldview, that Israel is bad, Palestinians are good. And you know, the Arab world has moved on. The Arab world isn't concerned at all about the Palestinian problem. They've got bigger fish to fry.
And
but Obama's lost in the 70s and 80s.
They're leading on the world stage more than Obama. That's scary. Egypt and Jordan. All right,
Yes.
I got to roll. Thank you, Colonel.
Saudi
Good to
Arabia.
see you.